Hello, Body and Messiah. Today we're going to continue our series, Africa Throughout the Bible, TBON, Lesson 2. Today we're going to do Part 7, and I think I'm going to also do a Part 8 after this particular part. So in Part 7, we're going to begin by covering some of the areas that we have previously covered as a refresher. And then I'm going to share with you the additional information that I found. So we're going to cover some things that are associated with the Torah, of course, with Africa throughout the Bible and the origins of man that I've shared with you in Africa throughout the Bible. I think it was lesson 2, part 2. So we're going to begin here, and I'm also going to share with you the information from the Negro Land map, and that lesson where I cover the Negro Land map and some of the origins of man is in a lesson series called The Why, W-H-I, the Whole House of Israel, and it's lesson number 5. So what I found when we open up the Negro Land map is there is a region that is labeled in the Negro Land map called the Deserts of Seth. Okay. Now, the Negro Land map is a map of Africa labeled Negro Land, and the map is from 1747. So whenever you hear me state Negro Land map, it is a map of Africa that's from 1747. And another region, now Deserts of Seth. As you can see, the Deserts of Seth. Seth is the third son of Adam and Eve. Okay, Seth. S-E-T-H. And after Cain and Abel, there was Seth. Now, another region was labeled in the Negro Land map called the country of Adam. Okay? Country of Adam. Okay, and we know Adam and Eve from the Bible. So this region here was called the country of Adam. Now, if you go to Genesis chapter 4, verses 20 through 21, there is a region that I discovered that's in, and this is current day regions of Africa. But there is a space in Sudan that is called Jabal, Jabal. And then there's also, if this is in Sudan or South Sudan, a region named Juba. And it's spelled J-U-B-A without the L. But if you look in Genesis chapter 4, verse 20 through 21, Jabal and Jubal are the sons of Lamech. They're Noah's brothers. So we have the origins of man, and we also have this region here that's labeled Jabal and Jubal. These are brothers of Lamech. Now, in Chad, there is a region, a place named Terra. It's T-E-R-A without the H. But if you look in Genesis chapter 11, verse 26, you'll find that Terah is the father of patriarch Abraham. So, as we can see, all of this stuff is in Genesis that we see here. And we have these regions that are named, close proximity. Like I've said over and over again, Africa is well known to be, by archaeological evidence and by DNA, the DNA of the people in that region, to be the origins of man. All throughout Ethiopia, Uganda, Tanzania, Kenya, Somalia, the oldest bones in the world are found there. So here I'm moving on to what I newly found. And what I newly found are associated with mountains, okay? And we're dealing with mountains of God, or mountains of the moon, mountains of the sun. So I have this label here. But you know, they're associated with Mount Sinai. So according to these geological experts and biblical expert, Mount Sinai can be referred to by multiple names. So hold on, I'm going to share some information with you real quick to show you, for you to go and look on your own, the different references that are associated with Mount Sinai. Okay, here I'm sharing some information with you for you to go look up on your own time. And you can go to a site, and it's called the Jewish Encyclopedia.com. If you search for the title is Sinai, Mountain, or the title Mount Horeb Biblical Data, you will see this section of article. This excerpt is authored by a person named Joseph Jacobs, M. Seligsum, Wellham Bacher. And when you look at this excerpt, when you look down towards the bottom, and there's a quote there, down towards the bottom, and the scholars believe that the name Sinai is derived from the name of the Babylonian moon god named Sin. Mount Sinai is often referred to as the mountain of Elohim, or the mountain of Yahweh, or Horeb. You can also go look under www.britannica.com, and the topic is Sin, S-I-N, which is a Mesopotamian god. In the notes you'll find in the excerpt is that this is an Akkadian deity, basically a Babylonian Mesopotamian deity named Sin, and he's also referred to as god of the moon. Sin was the father of the sun god named Shamash. So now you got these multiple names for Mount Sinai, and you look in the biblical scriptures that I have here. In Exodus chapter 3, verse 1, this is where Moshe encounters the burning bush. And it says that this burning bush, that he went to an area named as Horeb, Horeb, the mountain of God. When you go to 1 Kings chapter 19, verse 8, this is where Elijah, he went to Horeb, the mountain of God. He was getting nourished after he fled from Ahab, after he called down fire to destroy and kill, to take his sacrifice, and those servants of Baal and Asherah, those prophets of Baal and Asherah were killed. But the area is named Horeb, or mountain of God. And then here in Exodus chapter 19, verses 1 through 3, this is after the children of Israel fled from Egypt, and now they arrive in a region called Sinai, or the wilderness of sin. Some expert refer to it as that. And they say that Moshe, he goes up a mountain there, and that this is where he receives the 10 Commandments. Now, according to the experts today, Mount Sinai is located somewhere here. Okay, around where the Sinai Peninsula is, Mount Sinai. But I've seen on some previous maps, some old maps of Africa, Arabia was considered, in this part of the Middle East, was considered just northern Africa back in the day. But then they began to slice and dice, like they, cornered all these different sections of Africa, and they began to call this the Middle East and Saudi Arabia, what have you. But anywho, in some older versions of the map, they have Sinai here, the wilderness of sin, okay? But we're going to go with what these so-called experts are saying here. And these so-called experts believe that Mount Sinai and Mount Horeb and the mountain of God is all the same location. And to me, I thought that was kind of strange. You see, when the burning bush occurred, Moshe is somewhere in this region. This is what I believe. Because remember, he's in the regions of the Midianites, and his father-in-law Jethro, and his wife. They're described as descendants of Cushite, or Ethiopian. So I believe they're somewhere in Africa here. So when I began to look and I started discovering on some of the maps that there are various mountains that can be referred to as basically the mountain of God, or mountain of the moon, or mountains of the sun. So follow along with me. I partially covered one that could be referred to as mountain of God, or where God is seated, when I covered Mount Kenya. So here, now I'm not exactly sure, the mountains could be a mountain range that goes across Africa, okay? So I'm just going to put it in the region that represents Kenya, for example. So here's Mount Kenya. It's also referred to as Karenega. Karenega means seat of God. And the indigenous people there, from word of mouth carrying down, said that Nagaya, God created Gikuyu, the first man. And then God also sent Mumbi, the first woman, to Gikuyu. Now you can look at this in more detail when I mention it, when we're looking at Africa throughout the Bible, lesson 2, but in part 2, in that latter half of that particular lesson, I cover Mount Kenya. So this is known as Karenega, the seat of God, basically where God resides. Now, Mount Sinai is also, like I said, known as the mountain of the moons. Now, in Uganda, there is a mountain named Rwenzori, Rwenzori, Rwenzori Mountains. But Rwenzori is translated into moon, mountains of the moon. Okay. Then when I looked at a 1644 version of Africa, map of Africa, there is a region labeled Luna Montes. So basically Moon Mountains is found there. Then when you go and you look at a 1710 version of Africa, you get basically the same thing. Luna Mountains, basically Moon Mountains. Then also in the 17 version map of Africa, there's a region called Mountains of Sunda, basically of Sunday, basically the sun god, mountains of the sun. All right? So, according to the word of God to me, it is a possibility that these three are three separate mountains, not the exact same mountain here. And so, as I stated, the burning bush, I believe it appeared here. And when you deal with the origins of man, in the possible seat of God, or where God resides, it would be here, where the creation of man would be, not up here or even here. Okay. Now, I'm going to cover one other thing that I found, and this right here changes the dynamic. I'm going to have to change the position of the camera, but it changes the dynamic of where we perceive the boundaries of actual Israel, according to the Bible, to the word of the Most High God, in Genesis chapter 15, with the covenant with Abraham. So hold on, I'm going to have to reposition to face further on this side of the map, okay? Okay, now we're going to focus on this region here, okay? And if you look in Genesis chapter 15, verses 18, that's what I'm mainly going to focus on for the things that I found. Okay, now if you go to Genesis chapter 15, verses 18 through 21, this is where Adonai Elohim, after he's cut the covenant with Patriarch Abram, he is telling him the boundaries of what land he's going to give to him and his seed. And We know just based on verses 18 through 21 that the region that are defined by the United Nations as being Israel is not Israel, the entirety, totality of Israel, according to the word of God. So they go contrary to the word of God. And we know this because of one of the boundaries that they give for the land that's promised to patriarch Abraham and his seed. One of the boundaries is from the river of Egypt. And we know what the United Nations and the people are fighting over in the Middle East now that they call Israel is nowhere near the river of Egypt. Nowhere near it. So there's a huge portion of land that is not being considered. And that's fine because God has a purpose and a plan in everything. Okay? He's the creator of the universe. So what the United Nations is defining as Israel just goes along this little region over here. And I mean, it's a little bitty speck compared to what Adonai Elohim promised patriarch Abraham. Also, when you notice like the different people groups that God says that the descendants of patriarch Abraham are going to overtake in this region, they're not all Canaanite people. They're a variety of people who can be found throughout Africa, okay? And even North Africa or parts of the Middle East. So let's go ahead and read Genesis chapter 15, verse 18. It says, on that day, Adonai cut a covenant with Abram, saying, I give this land to your seed from the river of Egypt to the great river, the Euphrates River. Now, this phrase here, the great river, has always troubled me because to me it's stated as if to, is it an adjective for calling the river of Egypt great? Or the river Euphrates great? Or is it separate by itself? And a part of me always felt the great river might be the name of an actual river. So here is what I discovered when I was looking at old versions of the map of Africa. And once again, this is found in the 1710 version of the map of Africa. Okay. All of this here is my attempt to draw this river channel. It goes all the way here, it makes a lake. It goes somewhere up here, makes a lake. It goes all the way down through here towards Cameroon and Gabon. Okay? So this is huge compared to the Euphrates River. The river of Egypt is huge and long compared to the Euphrates River. So what I found is in the 1710 map, there is a region where this river, the name the Great, and then there's a space, river, is identified here. Okay? And then there's also a name on top of this river channel in the 1710 map that is named Berissa. Okay? Berissa. Berissa. Now, if you go and look up the Niger River, Niger, the Niger River on Wikipedia. And the reason why I'm stating Wikipedia is because you need to, once you go to Wikipedia and you look up the Niger River, go under the etymology. And the etymology lists the different names of languages and people groups and their dialect and the words they use to describe this river here. And you'll find that the Mandinga people have a word called Joliba or Jeliba, Joliba or Jeliba, that they describe this particular river. And then there's a Zarma language. They use a word, Isa Beri, okay? Isa Beri. And all three of these words, Joliba, Jeliba, Isa Beri, translate into the Great River. So body Messiah, when we look at translations, biblical translations from the Hebrew, and I probably need to go back and look at the original Hebrew, this basically here is defining three separate rivers possible. It says from the river Egypt to the great river. See, this is a great river. And then the Euphrates. So all of this region, there's no mistaking why in part 6, where we cover the lower half of Africa, you got all of these regions like Zoar, Mamre, Hebron, Bera, where the Agagite people or Amalekite people are associated with, coming through here, who are descendants of Canaan, and how Patriarch Abraham pursued these kings of Sodom and Shinar all the way to Dan. Okay? There's no mistaking. So this whole region, there's a reason why you have the area that's associated with Patriarch Abraham purchasing burial property around here throughout Africa. So Africa is throughout the Bible, body of Messiah. We have to take back our narrative when it comes to this. We have to teach Africans and descendants of African slaves about this, because the word of God has been taken and taught wrongly for centuries. It's been manipulated for the benefit of glorifying white supremacy, and it has been manipulated in order to put a certain group of people in a favorable light. But we have to worship the Most High God in Ruach and in truth. So we're obligated to teach our current generation and the next generation the whole truth associated with the Word of God. I've always wondered why people would degrade and talk about Africa, the continent of Africa, which is not the motherland, mind you. I call it the fatherland because it's the origin of Adam. Okay? They talk about it so bad, like it's, worthless, but it provides resources to sustain the entire world. When you look in Exodus chapter 3, verse 8, God is telling the descendants of Israel that I brought you out of Egypt and I'm taking you to a land that is large and good, rich with milk and honey. Africa provides resources that sustain every place on the planet. It's been robbed, it's been pillaged, it's been abused and colonized, and God is changing the tides of that. But as He's changing it, we have to understand that Africa is throughout the Bible, and it coincides with the Word of God continuously, more than any region on the planet. More so than just this little speck over here that's more desert land. It's not rich with milk and honey. It's not a large land. So, I'm going to have to go back and add a correction, add this link also to a previous lesson where I cover in the why about Israel and the boundaries, because basically this is new information that I didn't know at that time from 2 years ago, what have you. But body of Messiah, let's move forward in worshiping the Most High in Ruach and in truth, and teach our next generation so that they will know better. Teach descendants of Africans and African slaves who they are and about the origins of man and how Africa is intertwined with the Word of God. Well, body Messiah, this is the end of part 7. I'll probably do a part 8, and then after I do part 8, I'm going to move on to another lesson for TBON that's associated with the spiritual gifts or the gifts of the Spirit. Because, there's a lot of confusion nowadays, especially here in America, when we deal with that, with people so-called prophesizing or speaking in tongues. And we have to be very clear on the Word of God, and because it's the instruction manual, so that we don't be deceived in the latter days. Well, this is the end of part 7 of lesson 2. And like I always say, may Adonai Elohim cover and surround you and your family, shield and protect you, and envelop you in His shalom peace. Goodbye, body Messiah.